fear. Some of these topics that we're going to talk about, you bring them up in the church, you're going to get criticized, get looked at, ostracized. To be transparent, that's what's going to happen. These are topics that typically do not get brought up because you are constantly in fear of the what if. What if I talk about this issue? What if I talk about that issue? But let's keep all our stuff very surface level that doesn't get me in trouble, doesn't get me fired, doesn't get me moved.
And we know there have been repercussions for clergy and other leaders who have tried to speak truth to power in the past. I think it's not just about dealing with the resistance from parishioners, but also a threat to life and a threat to families. And so I can kind of understand why some people would maybe not say as much as they would want to if they're experiencing that kind of fear. But as leaders in the church, we have to find the courage, we have to find the fortitude to say what is necessary. And that is very much a part of our calling as shepherds in the church.
Well, everybody, we're glad you're joining us here with the Vine UMC podcast. We're back in a new studio. We're trying some stuff out. But today we're going to dig into why are we doing a series on We're Sorry, the Church. Why would the church need to apologize? Why does this matter? This is a lot of topics in one. Aaron and Sean, both pastors at the Vine, and we're just going to chat about it today. So we've all been in the church for a long time now. We've all worked on staff for a long time now. Why are these topics that we probably haven't really talked about before?
Yeah, honestly, the main reason is fear is going to be the biggest thing because, some of these topics that we're going to talk about, you bring them up in the church and you're going to get criticized, you're going to get looked at, you're going to get ostracized. To be transparent, that's what's going to happen. These are topics that typically do not get brought up because you are constantly in fear of the what if. What if I talk about this issue? What if I talk about that issue? But let's keep all our stuff very surface level that doesn't get me in trouble, doesn't get me fired, doesn't get me moved, whatever.
So fear of those giving the talks and the sermons and the whatever of what will the congregation.
Right. Because I think that's a constant, what are the repercussions, of what might happen.
And we know there have been repercussions for clergy and other leaders who have tried to speak truth to power in the past. I know especially in the South, there have been white clergy who have been threatened, who had to leave their homes. Methodist pastors in Mississippi who spoke out about racial injustices taking place in Mississippi, and they all had to leave Mississippi for a period of time. And so I think it's not just about dealing with the resistance from parishioners, but it's also an issue of livelihood, but also a threat to life and a threat to families and whatnot. And so I can kind of understand why some people would maybe not say as much as they would want to if they're experiencing that kind of fear. But as leaders in the church, we have to find the courage, we have to find the fortitude to say what is necessary. And that is very much a part of our calling as shepherds in the church.
So do we think it's a little bit of a leading question, I'm not trying to mean it that way. Do we think it's the systems that we have built as the church that are creating these? Because it felt like a lot of so when we're reading the early church, the disciples, they said some hard stuff. Jesus is known for saying hard things to people in power, especially.
Well, Paul did too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Extremely hard.
Yeah, Paul was good at it.
Yeah, Paul was great at it.
We still deal with Paul.
We're still dealing with Paul. Paul would write a letter today, so
I think we'd get a lot of letters today.
And the prophets in the Old Testament, those poor people were fighting for their lives trying to speak truth to power.
Exactly.
And it always worked out great for the prophets.
Elijah would like to have a word.
I never finished any of them. I always got to where they said the hard stuff. I figured it would go great.
And Jonah.
Lord. He didn't want to say the hard stuff.
And he did eventually after he
got swallowed by a whale or a big fish. and then said the hard stuff, and then went and pouted at a tree and said, see, I didn't want to say the hard stuff because it might actually do something.
See, God, I was going on vacation. That's all I wanted.
No, he was like, you want me to go that way? Cool. Bye.
I'm out.
Yeah. So easier said than done.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
What I love about this platform is that we can sort of say these things and not really like get away with it, but it just gives us the venue, the avenue to be able to express these kind of things and be.
Yeah. As long as we don't tell anybody we did it.
Well, I don't care.
As long as we don't record it and put it on the internet, good to go.
Right. I mean, I was thinking about this, like we're going to talk about racism is one of the topics we're going to talk about. I'm reading currently, just started a book called Read Jesus by Alan Hirsch, who's a church planter. Mm-hmm. And like he starts off talking in the very first chapter about the Ku Klux Klan and how they would meet in churches in the South, and they would have these meetings and then profess it all to Jesus Christ. And I'm like, you know, how can they do, you know, I'm like, and he is like basically saying that we have totally gone the wrong direction, professing what should not be a part of the church and giving it to Christ. And he says we need to refocus the church back on Christ.
Well, and the same could be true today with, like, obviously racism is still a problem, but also like Christian nationalism.
Correct. We're going to talk about that.
Has come through, like it's been birthed in the church. And it is, if you look at them side by side, what is following Jesus, what is Christian nationalism, they are not the same. No. But a lot of people, if you ask them questions on it, would probably struggle to see how Christian nationalism isn't Christianity in some ways because of what has been said in the church.
Right.
Yeah, we have been reared under these concepts, and we don't always recognize that, you know, and I think, and we see it all the time when we step into a new church, we have that objective point of view. So we can see things that they can't see, but because they've been a part of this organization for so long, they kind of miss some things. And it's comfortable. And so when we get to a point where we're challenging them and what we see, it's often met with resistance because they're comfortable and they like the way things are. And it's not that they're bad people. It's not that they subscribe to the hatred and you know, the ways the church can hurt. It's just that they're not really experiencing that for themselves. And what they are experiencing in the church is comfortable for them, and they find meaning in what they have going, you know. And so because we are in that comfort zone in our church, we can get a little defensive.
So I guess maybe I'm asking another question then is, how do we help the church break the cycle?
I think the first step for us is to do what we're doing now and just naming the things and exposing, just pulling off those wounds, like opening that closet of skeletons and saying, hey, this is here. It's always been here. Whether you want to acknowledge or not, we have to talk about these things. It is dire if we want to continue to grow and thrive as a church.
I had a clergy friend here in the Tennessee, Western Kentucky. They got basically hurt by the church because he removed the American flag from the sanctuary. And he got the 5th degree for doing that because he said we're not worshiping this flag. So,
I mean, and that's the Christian nationalism pit too, is like, so yes, we are in America. Yes, that means freedom of religion.
Correct.
Those are not bad things.
No, not at all.
But it's like, where are we in the, because I've been to churches where it's like American flag, then the Christian flag. And I'm like, no, but also just no flags. But it's hard, right? Because like, how do you separate those two? And then Christianity is not an American thing. It is a global thing. And I think looking at how followers of Jesus in other countries compared to American Christians, those can be drastically different.
Correct.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to acknowledge that in America, we are a pluralist society. We're not a Christian society.
Correct.
There is room for Christianity, but there is room for other beliefs and traditions as well. And as Christians, it's important for us to respect what others choose to believe. It has no bearing on what we believe, you know.
Yeah. So as we dig into hard topics, which we are acknowledging is not normal in the church and is hard, what are some ways we can posture ourselves to hear things that we don't normally hear, maybe in a new light? What are, like, how do we prep ourselves? So, like, if we're talking about hard stuff, so, like, when I go to therapy, my therapist is hilarious because every time he's like, okay, I'm going to ask a hard question. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. If we're, like, just shooting the breeze, why am I here? No, dig in. So, like, how do we prep ourselves to know, like, this is going to hurt a little bit? Whatever the topic is, wherever you are on it, even if you think you're right, there's parts that are going to hurt. Right. So how do we prep ourselves? Like, what are ways that you do that? What are ways that we can prepare others?
Oof.
I don't know if we can truly be prepared, honestly. And truth be told, with these issues, we're talking about church hurt. We're talking about experiences people have dealt with. I just want to face that. You know, forget how I feel about it. I just want to put myself in a position to acknowledge what has happened so that growth can take place. And if that makes me uncomfortable, if I have to go through conflict and disagreements, then I am ready to receive all of that because it's necessary. So I don't really know if you can really prep.
I don't know if you can either. I mean, because I think the natural thing for us is to put ourselves in sort of a defense mode. Like, all right, here it comes.
Exactly.
Here it comes. Let me just prep myself now. What's
it's gonna hurt.
This is gonna, yep. And whatever it may be, whatever that topic may be. I mean, I go to counseling too, and it's like, all right, let me have it.
Yeah, and I've seen that in the church too with body language when you're preaching. There it is.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like
we were real good at that.
Guy on the front pew, like the first moment he hears the word slavery, there he goes.
Like, this Sunday we're going to talk about tithing.
Let's get to the good stuff where we're in a grassy meadow.
Jesus loves you.
I mean, he does.
He does.
And said, follow me. And then that's the part where it gets rough.
And then he says, pick up your cross. What?
Go sell everything. It's hard for a rich man. We got some things to deal with.
Yeah.
Or like that, and half the crowd laughed type vibes.
Right.
I saw a video yesterday, and someone sent it to me and said, I figured out how to get into heaven. And he goes, you take this really big needle, and this eye of a needle huge, and he goes, and you get really small camels. And he goes, I got it.
Yeah,
I can keep my money.
That's the literal that Jesus always did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What was it, like 90% of the time Jesus was asked a question, he either told a story or asked a question?
Right.
They're like, hey, so straight answer here. And he's like, so there's this guy.
Let me tell you a story.
Let me tell you a story.
And then he walks off and you're like, did he answer that?
Right.
But then there's so many things that can be drawn from those stories.
100%.
Like you can explore different angles. And
was he talking about me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think that's the point, right? It's like if we ask for a straight answer and get a straight answer, then you think it's back to like right and wrong, and this is and like
right.
Love and relationship is never that.
Yeah.
I think what is that is defining what is harm, what hurts others, and the church has done a lot of harm throughout history.
Yes.
We've got a great track record of harm.
Oh.
And that sucks. If that's how we're known, that sucks, and I understand it. And I think part of why we wanted to talk about this is not to solve that, but to acknowledge it and begin to have some of those conversations of like, yes, that is not what Jesus is calling to us to. What are we called to?
Right. And I think we need to talk about these issues because, one, the church is in decline because of all of this church hurt. And what I've seen as a pastor, but also as someone who was once a parishioner, is that there's so many people in the world who just don't trust the church. They never did. But now, like in our current society, people have taken it a step further, and they're not just in this position of not trusting the church, but they feel personally threatened by the church as well. And that is not who we are supposed to be. And we seriously need to address that. The church is supposed to be a safe space for everyone. Right. And in order for us to get to that point where everyone can feel safe and can find their home, we have to address these issues.
Right. And it's so hard because we have, like, one of the topics we're going to talk about, toxic theology. And it's like, we have multiple churches, multiple different theologies, multiple different, just viewpoints on everything. And then you have just one person to say, like, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to trust. I don't know where I'm going. And so a lot of times their choice is, I'm just not doing it.
Exactly.
I'm going to figure it out on my own. That may be the safest thing to do.
When I think I started saying it in college, it's really frustrating that all of the Christians represent the same Jesus to everyone else. Because it's like, yes, but no, but we're talking about the same guy, but not in the same way, and very different understandings.
Yeah. My son plays music for a very hardcore Christian band, and one of their main songs they play, it starts off like this kind of talking. They take it from somewhere, and the very first comment before they start playing, it says, "I really like your Jesus. It's the people of the church I really can't stand."
Okay.
And then the music starts playing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand any of the words, but
yeah. And I've heard a saying, "There's no hate like Christian love." Have you heard that one?
Yeah.
And those ring true because we know that's not what we are called to.
Exactly.
But we also know that it is very accurate for how a lot of this has been portrayed, a lot of how it's lived out. There's been just crazy, like, leadership failures. There's been crazy system failures. There's been, like, evangelism tricks to get checks on a belt.
Yes.
Jesus doesn't do any of that, and yet that's how we're representing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I didn't see Jesus walk around, I need you to fill out this form I'm going to get you on record.
I am curious, who counted the 5,000? Was it like a pastor count of like, that's 5,000? Or was it like literally like probably Luke or somebody was going around?
No, it was Matthew. Remember, wasn't he
Was he? Well, yeah, but I'm thinking who was the counter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think who was like, 1, 2, 3, stop moving.
Yeah.
You counted that one twice. No, I didn't.
Yeah, and
It
I
came to the
think
first service. You can't count that.
Oh no.
after we tackle these issues, I think we can begin to have more conversations about how we approach mission and evangelism and rethink all of that stuff too, because, evangelism, that's just one issue where I think we've gotten it really wrong in the church. It boils down to, how do we get more butts in the seats on Sunday? How do we increase our giving units? And that is not evangelism.
Also units. But it's what people say.
Yeah.
But,
You're right. Not giving families, giving individuals, people, their units.
Yeah. I literally had a church one time told me, when we were talking about reaching our community, they said, well, why don't we put a banner in the front yard of the church, and that way we can reach the community.
Solved it.
That was the first solution they put out there.
Well, it would be hard to talk to people. So let's not do that. Let's not actually find out what the needs are.
So then we started talking more about relational evangelism. Mm-hmm. Let's go meet people, talk.
Exactly.
Conversation.
Leave the church.
What?
Go talk to someone.
What?
I don't.
And not with the intent that you're trying to bring them into the church,
just have a conversation.
Because you're trying to cultivate relationships with your community.
Yes.
I was a PK. I probably told y'all that. It's okay. I'm still recovering.
I'm not even Catholic.
Even as a clergy person.
I was baptized Catholic. Confirmed Methodist, Methodic. It's better than Catholic.
You baptized a second time?
No.
I'm just checking.
No.
I did not know that about
We're
you.
getting that on record.
No, now we're learning lots about each other.
We are, yes. But I was raised in my dad's church, and it was United Methodist, but it was not all that traditional. And my dad wasn't really raised in the UMC. He decided to become a part of a church as a middle schooler. But there are some people in the community who nurtured him and kind of invited him there, but it was his choice. He wasn't there because he had to be. And so his view of church was just totally different. And I was reared in this environment that was incredibly missional. The church knew the community knew the church. There were always people in the church, people from the neighborhood who weren't exactly like members, but they were there meeting for different reasons. During Katrina, my hometown was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. The church was a point of distribution, and so people from all over the Gulf Coast were coming there to get supplies and food and things like that. So many programs for kids, Vacation Bible School, summer camps, all of that. I've met so many people from the coast just from church, encountering them in different ways in the church. And it was my view that the church was the cornerstone of the community, that anybody could gather there. It was one of the most formative experiences for me to be in a space where people were nurturing. I learned a lot about Black history and Black pioneers during Black History Month. And to this day, I don't even know who would hang up all of these images of Black pioneers on the walls and of the fellowship hall. But that's how I learned about those pioneers. And when I got older and started going to other churches, I didn't really experience that same kind of nurture. And I was confused because I was like, the church is supposed to be like out in the community. We're supposed to be showing up for people, and there's supposed to be different types of folks in the church, but I don't always see that. Like most of the time I don't see it. And it made me question, what is the church? Like I had this view, this concept of church my entire life, but as an adult, as a clergy person, I've experienced something different. But part of the reason why I have not left the church after experiencing what I don't believe is a church is because I had that experience as a kid, and I recognize that what we need to be is actually possible because there are people actually living into that even today in other places. And so it's my prayer that we can just all get on one accord and finally establish this identity that is not just theoretical, but it's also practical.
Well, and I'm sort of the same. I am a little older than you are,
What?
but I know it. I don't show it, but
You got some.
I saw that. That's all. It's from children. But growing up, I was Presbyterian, then Episcopal, then Methodist. But my family tradition, my grandfather was Church of God, so there's Pentecostal. That didn't stick with me. But for me, I did too. As young, I saw the vibrancy of the church. Out in the community, I saw that's what it was. And then, I think this is something I have wrestled with, and probably why I left the church for a while too, is like all of a sudden it became a very kind of stagnant kind of, it's all about the building, all about
Very insular.
us. Insular. It's just us. And then I was like, well, this is not what I signed up for. And then I went in the ministry, and it's like, okay, there has to be something different. And I think, like what you're saying, I think why I have stuck in ministry for long enough is because it's hope. I'm hoping that there is something better, and that what I can help pour into a church or ministry is getting them out of the box. And if I have to help tear down walls, then we're going to tear down walls. And that's what we need to do. And I'll bring the sledgehammer, whatever we need to do.
We got a lot of sledgehammer. I think it's interesting. So I'm in a weird place now where for 10 years now, I think that's right. Right around 10 years. My family has been a part of a church that did not have a building. We met in a building, but it wasn't ours. And still, our church does not have a building. We now own one, but you can't be in it yet. Like it needs some work. It needs work. It needs some love. A lot of love. And so it's interesting to me to be like, how different has it been without a building to maintain, to worry about who was in what building, at what room, at whatever, who was like, how much things cost and how much this and that and the other. And with the building not being the number one thing we were worried about, often the people can become that or whatever. It does make other things harder. So like, how do you serve people when you don't have a permanent spot? How do you create space for your community and others when you don't have a spot? So there's lots of other things. Right. But it's been really interesting having grown up in very established building churches to now not being in that for a bit, to now about to be back into a very established. We bought an old church that died. We bought their building, now we're renovating it. Right. What does that look like now? How do we live into life differently in a way that when they closed, they weren't? Right. But in other ways, they were. I mean, it's tricky, right? Right. It's really interesting, but I have noticed a trend, especially in the United Methodist Church, but this is true like mainline, larger churches, like mainline areas especially, where they kind of got comfortable with that they had built the system. So like in the Methodist Church, we were a movement. We expanded with the people. We saw needs and we did things. We built schools. We built hospitals. We built all these things. Right. And then we had a church in every county in America. Right. And I think we said we did it. And that's immediately when it flipped to insular. How do we not die? No. And when you're dying, you can either hold yourself really tight and say, here we go, or you can do something different. Right. I think we're here for the different. Yeah. We're not okay with the like holding on and the ship's going down, playing the last song.
We can't afford to do that, you know?
No. And I think the more and more every day, as a family that I met this past week, that where the parents, grandparents raised in the church, grew up in the church, the parents going to church, part of the church, maybe not as frequent, but like their kids now don't go, and then they're raising their kids, don't even know anything. And it's like, but that's what we're seeing today. And that's going to get more and more and more and more, where parents aren't being a part of the community, and then the grandkids and great grandkids, and it's going to be more, unless the church says, you know what, let's scrap this thing and refigure this out and go back to the basics, go back to where it started, and be a part of the community.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're all talking about. Yeah. And that's what our hope of this series is kind of hit a reset of like, we have fallen away from what Jesus called us to. Right. We have done terrible things, and we are going to own those. We're going to talk through them, right, acknowledge them, and then walk towards what we think Jesus really is calling us to, right, and figure that out together. And like, we're excited you're along for the ride, because like, this is a us thing, not just the three of us. Yeah. And you'll see other people along the way join us depending on what we're talking about, because they have more of like knowledge of what's happening in those topics. Right. And it matters.
This is just the beginning.
We're just getting started.
One thing we've learned from the early church and the early Methodist movement is the importance of community. God never intended us to walk this journey of faith alone. At the Vine, we have launched what we're calling branches, which are small groups that can help you find community where you are. Visit our website if you're interested in joining a branch.